Call an ambulance. Hurry up. My husband, who always rubbed me the wrong way, collapsed on the floor, drenched in a greasy sweat. The paramedics arrived swiftly, assessing his condition before lifting him onto a stretcher. Are you his wife? One of them asked me. Could you come with us to the hospital? As my husband lay there on the stretcher, he looked at me with pleading eyes. I met his gaze without wavering. No, I will not, I replied firmly, without a hint of hesitation. What? He murmured, his voice tinged with confusion, as if he couldn't comprehend what he was hearing. This man is a stranger to me, I continued coldly. So, I'm not coming. What? Please handle everything else, I said, turning away from him. Wait, Lydia, wait, he called out desperately. But I had something else in mind. I reached into my pocket and pulled out an object I had been carrying for days. The moment his eyes fell on it, his face turned ashen. How dare you treat me like a slave all these years? I said, my voice steady. This is my revenge. I will never forgive you. My name is Lydia. I'm a 36-year-old housewife living in a rented apartment with my husband Caleb. We met years ago through a colleague at work when I was still a full-time employee. My colleague, who had many friends, often invited me to social events. Being an introvert, I preferred watching movies or cooking alone, so I usually declined. One day, my colleague convinced me to attend a barbecue. Reluctantly, I agreed. The event was crowded, and I felt out of place until my colleague introduced me to Caleb. He was tanned, clearly an outdoorsy type, quite the opposite of me. But when we started talking, I found him sociable and humorous. Surprisingly, we shared many common interests, just as my colleague had predicted. We exchanged contact information and made plans to meet again. After several outings, we began dating. Caleb proposed after a few years, and we got married. He was always kind, the ideal partner to draw me out of my indoor life. But over the past few years, something changed. Caleb began saying and doing things that left me feeling increasingly uncomfortable. I quit my job to become a housewife because Caleb wanted me to. However, he often made sarcastic remarks about it. One evening, I was late preparing dinner because I had been feeling unwell. When Caleb came home, he immediately noticed. I'm home, Lydia. Hey, why isn't dinner ready yet? Hi, sorry. I wasn't feeling well today, so I rested earlier and couldn't get up in time. Can you take a bath first? I asked, hoping for some understanding. Ha! What's that about? He replied, clearly annoyed. You're a housewife. You should at least have the meal ready. His lack of concern for my health made me incredibly sad. Another time, I approached him about an upcoming reunion in my hometown. Hey Caleb, there's a reunion coming up in my hometown. I'll finish my chores, so can I go? Suit yourself, he replied indifferently. Well, being a stay-at-home wife is great, isn't it? I envy you, Lydia. You get to play around with the money your husband makes. Caleb usually treated me well, carrying my purse and bringing me flowers after work. But at times he could be so callous that I wondered if he wanted me to work. I even suggested taking a part-time job, but Caleb insisted that wasn't the case, so I remained a full-time housewife. One day, I received an unexpected call from one of Caleb's relatives. I answered, feeling a bit apprehensive. Lydia, the voice on the other end said urgently, Caleb's mother has collapsed. I froze, shocked by the news. The relative explained that she had visited my mother-in-law a few hours earlier and found her lying in the yard. She called an ambulance, which rushed her to the hospital. Panicking, I quickly got ready and dashed out of the house. When I arrived at the hospital, I was told her condition was still critical. As I was being briefed by the medical staff, Caleb arrived, breathless and frantic. We were escorted to my mother-in-law's room, where she lay in bed, her body connected to various tubes. It was heartbreaking to see. Mom, Caleb called out softly, but there was no response. Caleb stayed by her side for the rest of the day. I decided to head home to prepare everything needed for the days ahead. I needed to prepare for my mother-in-law's hospital stay, so I gathered everything she might need. After a while, she recovered enough to sit up on her own, but she still struggled to do anything without assistance. I'm glad she's able to sit up, I thought. I wonder if she'll be able to walk again if she continues with her physical therapy. As her discharge date approached, I brought it up with Caleb. Her discharge is next week, I mentioned casually. But Caleb's response caught me off guard. Oh yeah, are you ready? We'll be leaving this house next week, so you better start packing our things. I blinked, confused by what he meant. Caleb noticed my reaction and seemed irritated. "We don't need this house anymore since we're moving in with my mom at her place," he said, his tone dismissive. "Honestly, you're still as dense as ever." "Wait," I said, trying to process his words. "Does that mean we're going to live with your mother after she gets out of the hospital? I never heard anything about that. Did you decide this without talking to me? And have you already canceled the lease on this house?" Caleb's expression darkened further. "Of course, I've already canceled the lease. It's the right thing to do for us as a family to live together and help her. Don't tell me you don't want to live with her, do you? I'm the one who supports this family, so I won't tolerate any complaints." With that, he stumped back to his room, leaving me stunned. I never imagined Caleb would take such a hard-line approach, especially without consulting me. I couldn't believe he had already canceled the lease on our apartment. I had no choice but to move out. I knew he was concerned about his mother, but this was overwhelming. I sighed deeply. A few days later, I found myself living with my mother-in-law. I had never been a caregiver before, so everything was new to me. Most of my day was spent feeding, bathing, and helping my mother-in-law with her toileting needs. She didn't want me to take care of her and barely communicated with me. Whenever I tried to talk to her, she would retreat to her bed, claiming she was in pain. When my mother-in-law was healthy, we didn't have a bad relationship. In fact, we would sometimes exchange delicious snacks we found at the department store. But now, it seemed her frailty had overwhelmed her ability to care about anything else. On the other hand, my husband Caleb, who had insisted on us moving in together, was rarely home. After work, he would go out for drinks and return in the early morning. Even on his days off, he always found an excuse to go out. When he did come home, he would lock himself in his room and play video games. One day, I decided to confront him while he was immersed in his games. "I know you can't avoid working overtime or socializing with your colleagues, but can't you at least help me take care of your mother when you're at home? Or maybe help out with the housework?" I asked. Without even glancing away from the screen, Caleb replied, "What are you being so naive about? Housework and caregiving are your jobs. I'm tired from working, you know." Then, as if to emphasize his point, he added, "Oh, and I'm almost out of coffee. Go make me some, and clean this room, okay? And don't forget to take these to the dry cleaner. I need them by Wednesday." He spoke to me in a dismissive, one-sided manner, tossing his work clothes at me without a second thought. This time, I felt something inside me shift. I couldn't hold back any longer. "That's enough, Caleb. I've been doing all the housework and taking care of your mother every single day for the past month without a break. Why can't you help me, even a little?" Caleb slammed his game controller down on the desk, standing up with an angry glare. "How dare you talk to me like that? Who do you think you owe your livelihood to? If you've got a problem with me, then get out. Pack your things and leave." His voice dripped with sarcasm as he added, well, what about my poor mom? She's going to be left alone with no one to take care of her." His words stung, and I found myself unable to respond. It was true. I had only a small amount of money saved up, and I couldn't bring myself to abandon my mother-in-law, who was completely dependent on me. So allowing my frustration, I picked up his suit and quietly left the room. 6 months passed in this difficult routine. Then one morning, everything changed. When I went to check on my mother-in-law, as I always did, I found that she was no longer breathing. I called an ambulance and rushed her to the hospital, but it was too late. Caleb was in tears, but for some reason, I couldn't cry. I felt a strange, cold detachment as I watched him grieve. "You didn't do anything to help her," I thought to myself. And then, when I realized I no longer had to take care of her, a wave of relief washed over me. The guilt for feeling this way weighed on me, but I couldn't deny it. Time flew by, and before I knew it, 2 weeks had passed since my mother-in-law's funeral. It was time to organize her belongings. After Caleb left for work, I started cleaning out her room. I carefully placed her favorite clothes and accessories into cardboard boxes. There weren't many, so the task was done quickly. Next, I opened the cabinet by her bedside. It was nearly empty, but on the bottom shelf, there was a large tin. I recognized it. It was an old can of assorted sweets. I had given her the can when she was still in good health. Seeing it there now, I wondered why she had kept it. Curious, I opened the lid and found a letter inside. The envelope had my name on it, written shackily, "Dear Lydia." My heart raced as I quickly opened it and began to read. In trembling letters, there was a message for me. "Lydia, I am sorry for making you take care of me. I was ashamed of myself for burdening you every day. I was also ashamed of my son Caleb. I know how badly he has treated you. Lydia, you should leave him and live your life the way you want. My mother-in-law knew everything, how selfish her son was and how much I was suffering because of it. At the end of the letter, she wrote, I am glad that I was able to spend the last days of my life with you, Lydia. Thank you. In that moment, I cried for the first time since she passed away. All the emotions I had been holding back flooded out of me. I cried and cried until there were no tears left, and then I made up my mind. I would divorce my husband. 10 days had passed since I found the letter from my mother-in-law, but Caleb continued treating me like a servant. Lydia, I'm missing one of my socks. Where is it? And take my car to the car wash today. You've got nothing else to do, right? He was going out golfing with his colleagues, completely oblivious that today was our wedding anniversary. Not that I cared anymore. What are you going to do while I'm gone? You can't just sit around. You need to prepare dinner, clean my room, and scrub the bathroom. You've got plenty to keep you busy. His arrogance left me speechless. Hey, are you listening? Bring me my sock and a jacket. Hurry up, or I'll be late. Just as he finished barking orders, Caleb suddenly clutched his stomach and collapsed to the floor, writhing in pain and sweating profusely. He gasped for me to call an ambulance, his voice strained as if squeezing out the words. I stood frozen, overwhelmed by the sadness of the situation, as my husband yelled at me, Hurry up, you're really useless. Can't even call an ambulance. Strangely, his words made me feel calm. I picked up the phone and dialed 911. Within minutes, the ambulance arrived, and the paramedics quickly assessed Caleb's condition, placing him on a stretcher. As they prepared to leave, one of them asked, You're his wife, right? Will you come with us to the hospital? Caleb looked at me with pleading eyes, but I met his gaze with unwavering resolve and replied, No, I will not. His voice faltered. What? It was as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. This man is a stranger to me now, I said firmly. I'm not coming. Please take care of the rest. With that, I pulled out something I had been carrying in my pocket for days, divorce papers that Caleb had once forced me to sign during a previous fight, always threatening to serve them if I ever disobeyed him. As he tried to snatch the papers from me, the pain in his body made it impossible for him to move. He slumped back onto the stretcher, defeated. Excuse me, but please leave now, I told the paramedics, who finally took Caleb away. I watched as the ambulance drove off, likely thinking of him as a poor husband whose wife had just handed him divorce papers. It took some time, but the divorce papers were accepted, and the divorce was officially finalized while Caleb was still in the hospital for a week. As the ambulance left, I knew I was finally free. I was busy packing my belongings and sending them to my parents' house when I unexpectedly ran into Caleb at the grocery store. Lydia, please don't do this to me, he pleaded. You love me, don't you? Please don't leave me. I admit I've made mistakes. You always listened to me, no matter what I said, and I just got carried away. The once overbearing attitude he had a few months ago was gone, replaced by a completely pathetic look. What are you talking about? I replied coldly. The divorce is already finalized. It's too late for you to act so fragile. Go ahead, live your life as you please. He looked shocked, as if he hadn't really believed I would go through with a divorce. His hands were shaking, and his face turned pale. Well, that's that then. Bye. 6 months had passed since our divorce, and Caleb had once shown up at my parents' house. He rang the intercom and called out my name so loudly that I had no choice but to see him. Sure enough, he wanted me to get back together with him. When I stayed silent, he began to spill out details about his current lifestyle. He couldn't cook because he had forced me to do all the housework, so now he lived on TV dinners and takeout. He had gained 10 pounds since the divorce, his face and stomach visibly fuller. He didn't know how to do laundry, so his shirts were wrinkled and smelled strange, making him look even more disheveled. I finally realized how much you did, Lydia, he said, starting to sob. If I don't get my act together, the people at work won't like me. But I saw right through those crocodile tears. He just wanted to treat me like a servant again. There was no way I was going back to that. No, never. If you make any more noise, I'll call the police, I told him, treating him like a stranger. Caleb, clearly afraid of the police, left the house in tears. I was sure he wouldn't bother me again, and I hoped I was right. While my ex-husband seemed to be leading a very inconvenient life, I was living quite comfortably. I had stayed at my parents' house for a while, but now I rented a small apartment and lived alone. My standard of living was lower than when I lived with Caleb, but I loved this new life where I had my own time and space. I had worried about finding another job at my age, but as luck would have it, a friend of mine had a contact who was retiring, and I managed to step into her role. I felt so happy to spend my time and money on myself without anyone telling me what to do. From now on, I was going to take care of myself at my own pace. It was the beginning of a new chapter in my life.